What is going on, everyone? Nico Lind here, and here was some extremely exciting news. If you watch my crossing video on this boat, the Bahama 41, I talked about it a little bit, but we have some new motors on the boat. This boat used to be powered with the 350 Verado L6 motors, which are inline 6 motors, and now we just upgraded to these beautiful 400 horsepower V10 motors, naturally aspirated. The last L6s, those were supercharged. Great motors, we loved them. The boat ran perfectly with them, but we had just hit 1,000 hours, and so those still had a little bit of value left in them, and we wanted to keep it modern. So spent the money and got these V10s, which have absolutely changed this boat. Granted, the boat was never a slouch, you know, it was always a performer. You know, we still could cruise 40 knots all day with the old motors, but these just have taken the performance to the absolute next level. And really quick, before I get into it, I just want to take a quick minute to say that if you like the Bahamas, if you like boats, if you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me, lets me know that you guys appreciate what I'm doing. And also, if you like seeing the Bahama 41 and want to see more of these motors, it's on my channel in almost every video. So subscribe to the channel, like this video as well, and then comment below what you want to see, what kind of videos you want to see. And yeah, that's about it. Let's get back to it. All right, so before we get into the exacts and the details and the performance, which I'm going to do a full performance review, show you guys it running, the economy I'm getting, the speed I'm getting. So stick around to that. First, I'm going to show you the basic setup. You know, pretty standard. 4 Verados back here. You know, pretty standard. These two are on their own steering. These two are on their own steering. And as you can see, we kept the Optimus steering. We opted not to go for the Mercury steering, which once we get at the helm, I'll go into that a little bit more why we chose that. But white rigging tubes, this one's come out of the harness. I just realized that. I got to put that back in before we do too much else. But these are the motors. You know, I'm sure you guys are familiar with these modern generation of Mercury motors. To change the oil, it's simple, or check the oil. You hit that button, you open this up, you can check your oil, add oil, you can vacuum the oil out. To take the cowling off, you push this red button and pull that up. It's a big one-piece cowling. It's a significantly better design than the old L6 Verados that had that 2-piece top cowling and back cowling, which was, in my opinion, a miserable design. I hated it. The cables always rusted out. Just hard to do. And so, yes, that's my wife playing sounds through the sound system while I'm filming. And so, but they're an absolute beast. You know, there's not a whole lot to explain in the motors. Everyone's seen them. They're on a bunch of boats. The biggest thing is the performance. So I'm going to get behind the wheel. First, talk about the rigging and why we kept the old steering. And then we're going to get into a full sea trial and give you guys all the performance data. All right, so at the helm now, you can see we still have the old style binnacles. And there's a reason for that. So before this, we have the Seastar Optimus steering on the boat, which I know a lot of people don't like. I actually do like. I actually really like the steering feel. I think it's responsive. I think it's quick. Now it's a little bit loud, and I know it's had some reliability issues. We have really not experienced much. I had to replace the helm unit one time, but that's it. You know, in 6 years of ownership, I'll take it. And so basically, when you get the 400s, Mercury really wants you to upgrade to all the new rigging, their joystick system, their new throttles, the whole 9 yards. And so our issue with that is we have a joystick mounted. And now I actually hate the joystick because I don't think it works very well. You know, I use a spot lock on it, actually quite a bit, you know, waiting on fuel docks and bridges back home. But the actual joystick itself, you know, I'm indifferent towards. I could completely, you know, get rid of that and be done with it. And so basically, if you go with the new Mercury rigging, you know, the new throttles and all that stuff here, you have to go to the new Mercury steering. Now you can either go to their, you know, hydraulic electric assist steering or to their fly-by-wire steering. Whatever it is, you have to get rid of the Optimus, and so that means getting rid of this. And so I didn't necessarily want to do that. For one, I don't personally like the Mercury electronic hydraulic assist steering. I've had pretty bad experiences with reliability-wise. Now that's some of the older ones, but it leaves a sour taste in my mouth still. And so I didn't want that. And the Mercury fly-by-wire steering, that was the tempting option. However, Mercury, for a quad setup, wanted $60,000 for that fly-by-wire steering setup, which is simply outrageous. I mean, that's the cost of 1.5 of these motors, you know? I think we paid somewhere around 40 grand a motor. they wanted 60 grand for the whole steering setup, which just wasn't going to happen. So basically what we did is Mercury sells this little, I don't know if it's adapter or computer, whatever the thing is, that makes the old style controls here, the binnacles, compatible with the new 400s, and it allowed us to keep the Optimus steering, you know, and the Optimus joystick, which at some point down the road, we probably will upgrade to, you know, the, I don't know, fly-by-wire, but one of, because of the cost, but one of the new steerings out there, the Mercury steerings, and then finally get rid of this and put a Mercury joystick in its place. And so, we'll see. We thought about getting rid of the joystick. Oh, I forgot to mention, because I just mentioned the joystick. We thought about getting rid of the joystick altogether and going with that Mercury hydraulic assist steering. But my issue is then we would have a void here with nothing here, so we'd have to put a plate. And I am extremely OCD when it comes to the boat and what I like and what I don't like. And so this, if there was just a plate to cover a hole there, you know, you can make it look good in like white acrylic, but it would annoy me because it would never be completely flush and flat. And now you could do the glass work and the gel coat on top to fit it in. Again, my issue with that is that little spot, over time, that area of gel coat is going to fade at a different rate than the rest of the white gel coat on the boat. And so over time, if you don't stay 100% on top of everything, you're going to start to see a little area where that gel coat repair was. And I was not about to do that. So I've talked enough about the steering. That's why we kept the old binnacles. I actually need to replace the screen. The little light buttons, the lights went out on it. That's a pretty easy fix. But let's get into some performance. And really quick, before we get into the performance, one thing that I forgot to mention is how quiet and smooth these motors are. And then Mercury's they're all pretty quiet to start with. You know, the L6 motors, you know, they were pretty quiet. Now, when you got up and running, you got a little bit of that supercharger whine, but generally speaking, they were very quiet at idle. They were very quiet. These take it to an entirely new level, both at idle and while running. The first time Melly and I got on the boat, well, she got on it, I ran it over here. One of the takeaways was when you're up at cruise, if there's no music or anything, you can just sit and talk in a regular voice. You don't have to yell, there's no screaming. These things are extremely quiet and also extremely smooth. There's no vibrations coming through from the motors into the boat. They shift in and out of gear smoothly. Now granted, you know, when you have four of them shifting, yes, you do feel the little thump, those four gear cases all shifting. But it's just remarkable how quiet and smooth these motors are. And one thing that is pretty cool regarding the sound of it is they do have their sport mode, the sport exhaust, which is literally good for absolutely nothing except looking cool at the dock and impressing people. But it's pretty cool, you know, it makes it loud. And so real quick now, I'm going to put a quick video on the screen of me starting those motors up in sport mode. You can hear the, you know, V10 grumble. It sounds like a sports car going. And when we get back to the dock here, I'll put it in sport mode and give it a rev so you guys can see how cool that sounds. But super cool. And then I'll turn sport mode off and then on again and then off again so you guys can see the difference between sport exhaust and non-sport exhaust. Non-sport exhaust, you can barely hear the motors. Sport exhaust, it sounds like an Italian sports car. Pretty freaking cool. Alright, so performance-wise, I mentioned at the beginning, this boat is a whole different beast with these motors. We picked up a bunch of speed, we picked up a lot of economy, which was surprising actually, and it's just a more comfortable boat altogether, it's more responsive, the whole 9 yards, and part of that is, you know, these being big V10s, they have a ton of low end torque and a ton of push, so the motors really don't have to work hard at all to push this boat. And then on top of that, because of all the torque they spin, I forget the exact size, I think it's like an 18.5-inch propeller. It's a huge propeller with a lot of grip, and so, which pushes this boat fantastic. It has a ton of stern lift, which this Bahama 41 really likes. And so, it's been a pretty sweet package. So just to give you guys some brief numbers on the whole boat, with the 350 L6s, if I was at like 4,400 RPM, I'd be cruising somewhere around 35, 36 knots, doing probably 0.7 to 0.75 nautical miles per gallon. And I want to stress this something real quick. When I talk like that, I am talking in terms of nautical knots and nautical miles per gallon. In the last Freeman video, I had a bunch of keyboard warriors all chime in on how, oh, the numbers are horrible, I should be getting better than 0.65 miles per gallon. That was nautical miles per gallon. So times that by 1.15 roughly, and that'll get you statute miles per hour and statute miles per gallon. So this is in nautical miles per gallon and knots. That's just how I like running my boats. And so, again, that last boat at like 4,400 RPM, I would be doing 35, 36 knots at 0.7, 0.75 nautical miles per gallon, somewhere in that range. And at the top end, I could get that boat to about 61, 6,200 RPM. And I think the absolute fastest I ever saw was probably 51, probably 52 to 53 knots. So, you know, cool 60, 62, 63 miles per hour. So remember those numbers, 4,400 RPM at 35, 36 knots, 6,000 RPM wide open throttle doing 53-ish knots. And then on the low end, I could get the economy with those old motors above 0.8 nautical miles per gallon if I really, really was trying and really brought the speed down to like, the 28 knot range, 27, 28 knot range, way down there, even slower sometimes. These motors, I'm gonna kick it up in gear now and show you guys the actual economy. The first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna set it up and show you guys the whole shot because the whole shot is through the roof. I'm gonna do one without any tabs at all, and then one with tabs. And so with that, the boat doesn't need tabs whatsoever. So I'm gonna literally start from a standing still and absolutely just pin it. I'm gonna show you guys the speed so you can watch it and see how fast this thing gets up to 20, 30, 40, 50 knots. It's pretty damn impressive. Woof. As you can see, and that wasn't even max performance, I'm having to film while attempting to steer and hit the throttle at the same time, but you can see from 0 up to almost 60 knots, and I wasn't timing, but I'm gonna go ahead and put the times on the screen right now of how long it took to get to each one. So that was outrageous. Now I'm gonna do it with the trim tabs on, which we have the Humphrey, which is like an automatic trim system, which gets it on playing crazy quick. And it's gonna be even more impressive, so watch this. Hold on. And so as you can see, pretty damn impressive. It's essentially just boom, instantaneous, and yet this is nowhere near max performance. Oh, and I forgot to mention something in the video. I do only have 105-ish gallons of fuel in the boat right now, just because we're filling up after this. So, that's just for y'all's information so you can see this performance. And so we're gonna start heading into the marina because again, we have to go fill up. But on the way, I'm gonna show you guys the performance data and what, efficiency and speeds I can achieve at different RPM because it's pretty damn impressive. For me to cruise at 3,300 RPM, 33 knots, I'm only at like 3,700 RPM and I can get well above 0.8 nautical miles per gallon. Pretty damn impressive. For me to do that on the old motors, I'd have to be above 4,000 RPM and I'm getting somewhere in the 0.75 nautical mile range. So pretty significant difference. I don't feel the need to cruise above 4,000 RPM at all anymore. I can happily cruise at 40, 45 knots, 50 knots if I wanted, but that's not comfortable for anyone on board. You know, 30 to 35 knots realistically is a very comfortable speed for the people on board where they're not getting blasted with the wind. But enough of me talking. I'm going to turn around, head back towards the marina, and give you guys the, you know, performance and economy numbers. Okay, so I got to turn around. We're going to head back into the marina, and I'm going to give you running numbers. I do want to mention, you can see here, we're going into the wind, into a head sea. It's probably blowing 10 to 12-ish knots, so keep that in mind. Obviously, that's going to take a little bit off of our speed and economy. It's not going to make a huge difference, but it is something, so keep that in mind. I'm going to hit it now. I'm going to give Melly the camera, actually, to keep it facing forward real quick to show you guys how little bow rise there is now with these motors. There essentially is no bow rise. The boat just kind of gets up to running attitude and goes. It's pretty freaking impressive, and so I'm going to show you guys the bow rise, and then I'm going to hit a range of RPM on the way back, show you guys the speed and economy I'm getting at those RPMs.
Super fast?
Not super fast, no. Nice. And so as you can see, there's really not a lot of bow rise at all. I'm gonna get, you know, set up my RPMs and show you guys the ladder up. I will say real quick too, these motors like trim a lot. I think it's with all that stern lift. I'm trimming these significantly more than I was the old motors. The old ones at like 35 knots, like they like 8 to 9% trim. These motors at that speed, they like 14% trim, so significantly more trim. And again, I'm not going to get optimal economy going into a head sea like this where the boat's not trimmed out completely, but I'm still going to show you guys. Alright, so here is our first data point on performance. I'm doing somewhere around 3650 to 3700 RPM at 13% trim on all the motors, and at that I'm doing right around 32 knots, getting, you know, 0.83, 0.84, you know, around that 0.83, 0.84 nautical miles per gallon. So extremely comfortable cruising speed, getting significantly better economy than I was getting before. I'm going to bump it up a little bit more and show you guys kind of the whole range. All right, so here's our next data point. We're doing right at like 3850, 3900 RPM, trimmed at 15% across the board. I'm doing 35 knots at 0.82 nautical miles per gallon. That translates to roughly in the low 0.9s for statute miles per gallon. So pretty freaking impressive for a big 1600 horsepower quad engine Bahama 41 at 35 knots. And so let me get around the rock up here and I'll keep stepping it up. I'll go to 44 or 4500 RPM next, then 5000 RPM, and then wide open throttle, which is a little bit dicey. So I'm probably gonna have Melly film as we get faster because I need a hand on the wheel and a hand on the throttles for that. All right, so we made the turn, and just to give you guys a heads up on conditions, I am in more of a beam sea now, not quite the following sea I was before, but as you can see, I'm at like 4400 RPM, 15% trim across the board, and at that, I'm doing 41 to 42 knots, doing like 0.73, 0.72 nautical miles per gallon. And so to give you guys an idea, with the old motors at the same RPM, I was at like 34, 35 knots, getting the exact same economy. So pretty damn impressive if you ask me. Let me get situated. I'm gonna do a 5000 RPM run and then a full throttle run, which Melly's never experienced, so woo, gonna be interesting. All right, so up and running. We're at just like 5100 RPM at 50% trim. Let me bump that up a little bit. At like 16, 17% trim. We're doing 48 to 49 knots, getting just under 0.6 nautical miles per gallon, which isn't bad in my opinion. If I worked a little harder with the trim, I could probably see somewhere in the 0.6 world, but I gotta drive a boat, so it's a little bit tedious. But now let me slow down. So slowing down real quick, as you just saw from my experience, these motors, as you saw earlier, you know, the last couple minutes of this video, they're quite a bit more efficient. However, once you get up to that high RPM range, you know, 5000 plus RPMs, I found that's kind of where I've seen the economy start to tank a little bit and even out with the old motors. And then as I get faster, it just goes way down, but that's expected. You know, these are V10s, you know, that's 40 cylinders back there pumping a lot of fuel through them to get this boat up to 60 knots. And so You know, but realistically, I'm never running that high. You know, as I said, I like to keep it below 4,000 RPM now, just because I'm still doing, as you saw, 35 knots at that. The motors are hardly working. And so I'm gonna go get me some space and get a stretch to do full throttle to show you guys a wide open throttle. I can tell you from experience, the fastest I've seen is like 62 knots, which is, you know, 71-ish miles per hour. And so for this one, I am gonna have Melly hold the camera just because I have to be all hands on deck for this one. Let me find a little straight area and I'll show you. Here we go. Alright, so that was fun. As you can see, Melly had to film because when I do that, you know, when you're going 60 knots, if anything goes wrong, you know, stuff starts to happen at a very fast pace. And so I have to have one hand on the wheel and one hand on the throttle, working the trim the entire time. But as you can saw, there we saw 61 knots. Pretty damn impressive if you ask me. You know, the Bahama 41 is not a speed demon by any means, but these motors have turned it into a speed demon. You know, there's not a whole lot of boats out there that'll run 70 plus miles per hour, 60 plus knots. So pretty freaking impressive. All right, so you just saw the performance of it all. And again, I want to say, just so you guys have all the information, I do have only 100 gallons of fuel on board. This thing holds somewhere below 600. I have 560 programmed into the Garmin. And so I am pretty light on fuel when it's just Melly and I on board. So, you know, obviously load her down, take a little bit of economy off, take a couple knots off the top. Want to be perfectly upfront about all that. But in summary, because I've let this video drag on enough, these motors are an absolute beast. Completely changed the boat. Melly, you ran the boat quite a bit with the old motors. What do you think of the new ones? How did they change it?
I was impressed how stable they were.
Yeah.
Like we were like about 60.
Yeah, doing 61 knots.
61 knots, and it was just like pretty stable. So I'm very impressed about that.
Yeah.
It's like so much. Like the speed is like out of this world.
It's insane. And that's the thing I didn't even mention. And I'll mention it a little bit here. But so the Bahama 41 has already been an absolute monster at handling. You know, I can take, like, I'm in the Treasure Key channel now, you know, where you come across around this island and you take a hard 90 into the thing there. When we first got this boat, I would, to impress people, I would get the old boat up to 50 knots and then take this hard right turn at 50 knots in the boat. And people on board got terrified, but the boat just takes it and goes. It literally, and I've said this before in Instagram comments and everything else, this boat literally feels like a Porsche GT2 RS on the water. It grips, it goes, does not an ounce of sliding, minimal speed loss. The handling is truly impressive, and that's the boat as a whole. And these motors have just completely accentuated that with the grip that those giant 18.5-inch blades have and the torque this motor has. It literally is like a jet ski. I can whip this thing around like a jet ski, no problem at all. I wouldn't do it because I could very easily just throw someone overboard, which would not be a good idea. But that's an aspect that's hard for me to show you guys through the camera. If anyone's ever in Treasure or wants to feel it, let me know. I'm more than happy to take you out and, you know, show you firsthand the handling of this boat and how impressive it is. But overall, I am in love with these motors. So far, we are. Let's see how many hours I have on them so far. I am at 50 hours on the dot on them. So, you know, still fairly new. I'm still, you know, getting 100%. You know, tuned in with what they're capable of, but just a sweet package. This boat's an animal. If anyone is looking to get a Bahama 41, I highly recommend putting on the V10s.
Best boat ever.
I agree, best boat ever. Putting on the V10s, and you know, if you have a Bahama 41 that needs a repower and you're between whether it be the V8s or the V10s, get the V10s. You will not regret it. But that's about it for this video. If you guys like this kind of content, like the boats, like the Bahamas, please subscribe, because this boat is a staple of the channel, and there's going to be many more videos of me and this boat cruising around the Bahamas and traveling. We're actually filming one later today over on Elbow, so you guys are going to love it. Like the video as well, comment below what you want to see, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.